Right, Dr. Faust, this is an ad lib discussion today about humic and fulvic substances. What would you like to share with us today?
Well, I had a phone call this morning from an agronomist in California, and they asked me a question about our product Full Power, which is a fulvic acid solution, and it's a registered fulvic acid solution. So he was saying, well, can we put this right on the corn seed at planting time? You know, is that gonna hurt the seed? You know, or like how much do we need to use? Is that gonna be beneficial? And I explained to him that back in 1973, before I knew anything about humic acid, and I had a sample of raw humate, and I knew nothing, even though I completed, you know, agricultural college and soil studies and everything else. I'd never heard of humic acid or humate. So I did a test with sweet corn and using some poor soil, and it's on some of my presentations, the original pictures. And so what happens when you put fulvic acid on corn seed? Okay, well, this is like old information, you know, that I learned, you know, prior to 1973. Now here's a book on the subject called Humic and Soil Matter and Soil Environment. Okay, so they show a picture of different rates of humic substances, humic acid on corn, its effect on germination. Okay, so it's exactly what I saw when I tried the same experiment. So we know that there's a certain rate, certain concentration that stimulates seed germination, root growth, and root hair development, as well as shoot growth. Now you can see in the picture here, this one here, this corn seed has the longest root system. These two here, this is shorter, these are shorter still. This is the control that had no humic substances, is corn. See, you know, these had various concentrations. The one with the highest, longest root growth and the most extensive root system had 600 parts per million of humic acid. The one which had less root development had 1,600. You know, the one that had even less root growth at 3,200. So you have to understand what we're talking about here, that there's a specific range or concentration where it will increase root growth, plant growth in general. Okay, and then there's another range which either has no effect or less effect. So it's not so much like what humic acid you use, it's like what fraction of humic acid. Is it the low molecular weight fraction we call fulvic, which is our Full Power product, or is it the black stuff? The black, which is really non-humic. Okay, but you gotta also understand that to get the most effect from these products, you have to know what rate, what concentration is most effective. So you see, with nothing, you know, you get very different results than if you use 600 parts per million. So part of what we do is, it's not just we provide a product, we provide information on how to use that product based on research. We have a 20-acre research farm here. We have a laboratory. We have a greenhouse. We determine, you know, the best way, best concentrations, and the best fractions to get that effect. We know that humic substances have a major effect on plant growth, but only at the right rate, only at the specific fractions. See, so people ask me, well, what's the difference between your product and product X, Y, and Z? Well, I don't know, because those other products don't give you a guaranteed analysis for humic substances. So you know very little about it other than it's something black in a jug. So what, like I'm saying, it's about information. Like if you don't have the information and it's not based on really scientific research and determination, you don't know. You don't know what concentration to use. Frankly, you don't know whether it's going to have negative or positive results. And we've spent years, decades, at least I have, trying to figure that out. And so have other scientists. So humic substances are one of the most researched subjects in the world. And research has been done for literally centuries. You're talking about some of the original work was done back in the 1700s. You know, I could go into the history of it, it's extensive. But if you get down to the basics here, you know, as far as plant growth, you know, that's practical or important to the grower, the farmer, you know, it comes down to knowing what concentration, what product, what fraction you're going to have. There's no standard fulvic or humic acid. That's the problem. It's not like I'm going to add nitrogen in the form of ammonium nitrate to a Hoagland solution. So it doesn't matter what ammonium nitrate I have. All ammonium nitrate essentially the same. You know, it's a mineral salt. Okay, humic substances are extremely complex, and they derive from decomposed organic matter. Depends on what kind of organic matter, how it decomposed, anaerobically or aerobically, how it was stored. Was it leached over time? Was it oxidized? Did it get dry? Lots of factors. And so what we've done here is we've tested many sources, humic sources, and determined like which ones gave us the best plant growth and at what concentration. And that's important. It's the information that goes with the product and the experience. And my first experience with humic substances was in like 1973. Probably before that, because I was involved in biodynamic composting, and that's really a source of humic substances. So my experience with these humic substances goes back to the late 60s. And then I discovered humate, which is the source of most of your products nowadays, is leonardite, humate, that sort of thing. They're mined geologically concentrated humus. Okay, and from those, they're processed into usually a black liquid. And I found out early on that depending on the source, you either got no results or kind of spectacular results. And at the time, we really didn't know why. We just said, well, the humate from this source gets good results. Humates from this source don't. So let's use the one from the good source. So that's all you could do. You could watch the plants do these trials with corn, and okay, which one was the best? So that's pretty much how it was for most of the 70s, 80s, 90s. And then science caught up, and we got a little closer to why these things work. Okay, so basically 40 years of trial and error, really, you know, is how I came up with these products. Being a farmer, grower, you know, and consultant myself, you know, and I would say it's pretty much trial and error, you know, more than laboratory science. But now we have a nice laboratory and we understand the principles a little bit better. We have a test method in which we can register and guarantee the product and guarantee a specific content of, you know, fulvic acid or humic acid based on a new approved test method. And there's not many states that have adopted it yet, but here in Oregon they have. And we have maybe the only product, at least fulvic acid product, that's registered that way. There may be others as we speak. I'm not sure, but at one point there's only one or two that could pass the criteria. So when people ask me, well, how does your product compare with others? Look at the label. I mean, we spent a lot of time and effort in building a laboratory so we can determine and guarantee and maintain quality and a guaranteed content. So to try to compare our products with somebody else's, it doesn't even have a registered label, is impossible. You know, so I'd rule it out right from the beginning. Now the next issue is, corn and grain crops, wheat, barley, oats, rice, all that, sugarcane, are very responsive to humic substances. Does that mean all plants are very responsive to humic substances? No, it doesn't. Plants that produce a high level of carbohydrates. Okay, here's what the scientific literature says about this. Now, this is based on Russian research. The Russians were the people that invented soil science. They are also some of the most active researchers in humic substances, humus, humates, whatever you want to call it. And I learned a lot by directly working with Russian scientists back in the day. So this was suggested by Kristeva and Manilova back in 1953. So here's the 4 groups that have been suggested and rated in terms of the response to humic substances. Number 1, carbohydrate-rich plants. Okay, that's your potatoes, your sugar beets, carrots, tomatoes, showing a highly positive response to the application of humic acid. This goes back to 1953. So, I mean, we know that. People are asking me questions. Oh, I got to try the product to see, on a small patch before I see if it works. We've known these products worked back to the 50s. You know, so the question is not whether humic acid has an effect on plant growth. Which product can you trust? Which product has an effect on plant growth? Well, if it's actually humic acid, it has an effect on plant growth. I mean, that's been well established, you know. The question is, do you really have humic acid? And that's the idea of the label. That's why we have registration. That's why the Humic Product Trade Association and AFCO have developed a testing method. Still not the end all be all, but it's closer to giving the grower or the end user, a basis to choose a product. And if they leave the content off, I'd be concerned. And I've seen a lot of products nowadays that they don't try to register them. They try to suggest that it's humic acid, but they don't have an amount or guaranteed analysis. They may add some NPK and register it as a 2, 3, 4, or something like that. See, but that's not what we're talking about. Okay, so like I said, the most responsive plants are the carbohydrate-rich plants. Okay, so they produce sugars and starches. See? So that's your potato, your sugar beet, carrot, tomato. Show a high response, okay? The number 2 group of responsive plants is cereals. Okay, that's barley, oats, wheat, rice, corn. Show a moderate reaction to the application of humic acid. So, and then we get down to number 3 group, protein-rich plants. Okay, they're the ones like your legumes, green beans, peas, lentils. They show a minimal reaction to humic acid application. Minimal, okay? And then group number 4, oil-producing plants. Castor oil plants, cotton, linseed, sunflower, which are not affected or will be negatively affected by humic acid. So not only is the concentration important, the source of the humic acid important, how its process is important. Knowing what concentrations to use They've already been verified by research. Also, what plant are you using it on? And so, over the years, the kind of crops that people are using humic acid or humic products on the top of the list, just like on the group number 1, the carbohydrate-rich plants, first plant on that list, first crop on that list is potatoes. So we always get a big response on potatoes are very, very responsive. We usually get like a 25% yield increase. You know, and there's no need to reinvent the wheel to try that and see if that works. This is old information, okay? And then sugar beets, we always got a big increase in yield on sugar beets and sugar content. These are crops I worked with for years in Idaho and other western irrigated areas. And then carrots, I used to be an organic carrot grower myself. It's a sugar, very high in sugars if it's good carrots. And then tomatoes. Tomatoes is the classic research plant that I used to use in greenhouses to compare humic substances, because you get a big response on tomatoes. So they're the main responsive crops. And then you have your cereal, your grains, and they are very responsive, or they rated, or Kristativa and some of these Russians have rated that as moderate reaction to humic acid. So for instance, on our research and our product on wheat, for instance, we got maybe 15%, like on corn, you're in that range, you're in the 15-20% range of yield increase. And then your legumes, peas, beans, not so much, unless you use humic acid as a carrier for trace elements, because these protein-rich plants, your beans, peas, lentils, the limiting factor there, in my experience, was trace elements like zinc, manganese, boron, etc. So that's why I developed the product called TM7, where we combine the trace elements with the humic substances. So the humic acids increase cell wall permeability and have a chelation effect. So they transport these trace elements, into the plant roots, leaves, etc. And you'd get a big response on peas, beans, lentils, all that. Because the humic substance is now a delivery system to deliver the trace elements that are generally yield limiting or deficient, especially in western irrigated soils with high pH soils. So we found out that, yes, we did get a big response from humic substances when they were combined with trace elements, in the case of those crops. Now we get down to the oil-producing crops, castor bean, cotton, linseed, sunflower. You don't see a big response, for instance, on sunflower. So you have to understand that there's differences in reactions of plants. Okay, and for instance, do we get a big response for hemp? Hemp would be considered, is it an oil-producing crop? It doesn't really fit into category 4 as an oil-producing plant. It does produce oils in terms of hemp oil, but it also produces sugars, carbohydrates, and lignans, produces stalk. So it's kind of an unusual plant. It kind of is a combination of all these other plants kind of rolled together. It's kind of a grain, it's kind of sugar, it's kind of, stress dependent to produce cannabinoids. It's a little different ballgame.
High protein as well.
High protein, like your hemp seed is a high protein. You can't really be compared with castor oil or cottonseed or sunflower. So you can't. So hemp, at least in the early stages of growth, is highly responsive to humic substances. It's a humus-loving plant. So that means that it developed a nice framework, a lot of growth, a lot of good sized leaves. This is the effect of humic acid on gene expression in hemp or cannabis. Okay. So this is what you want to get you to the next phase, which is producing the seed or the cannabinoids, something like that. But since cannabinoids are related to stress factors or stress hormones in the plant, you reduce the humic substance applications in hemp, at the beginning of flowering, because you actually want stress if you're trying to increase the THC or cannabinoid profile of hemp. If you don't want to increase the cannabinoid profile, THC anyway, you would continue to use humic substances because it reduces stress. So since THC is produced based on stress, abscisic acid production, then you wouldn't continue to use the product through flowering. Okay, so that's what I'm saying. You've got to know not only what you're doing, what you're using, what concentrations, but how to use it, and what plants are responsive and what plants aren't. And so our company, I feel like we're an information company. We provide information, not just here it is. Here's like some black liquid in a jug. It's good, So I think that's why, I'm certain that's why, our product is a leading product in the hydroponic industry for 10 years, at least since we were in Oregon. It's more than 10 years, really, but so that's the important thing to consider. It's a very complex subject, and so without the information and the research, you're going to get confused, you're going to be misled, you're going to be sold a concept. Humic acids are good, they increase plant growth, they do all these good things. Yeah, but there's no standard humic acid. That's the missing link. That's the lie sandwiched between truths. Yes, humic acid. Which one? Which molecular weight? What concentration?
Which fraction?
Which fraction? That's what you need to know. And then which one do you use for which circumstance? Like in hydroponics, okay, so a hydroponic nutrient solution is ideally going to have a pH in 5s, 5 range, like 5.5, 5.6, something like that. You want to keep it acidic, somewhat acidic, for the nutrients, the minerals to stay available or in solution, ionized, for uptake by the plant. Okay, so let's say we put some of this black humic acid that you buy in a jug. We put that in there. Okay, well that starts out, that's actually not humic acid. That's the other thing. That's the salt of the humic acid. So it'll have a name like potassium humate or sodium humate. It's a salt of the humic acid. It is not humic acid per se, because the pH of it's going to be 10 to 11, which makes it a salt of the humic acid, not humic acid. How can a humic acid have a pH of 11 or 10, 10 and a half? That's alkaline, that's highly alkaline. So what happens when you put a highly alkaline humic acid product into a hydroponic media where you want a pH of 5.5? Well, the first thing that happens is the definition of humic acids. Okay, humic acid, the black stuff, brown stuff, the definition of that, it's soluble in alkali, but not acid. Okay, so the definition of fulvic acid, which fulvic just means yellow in Latin or gold. Okay, we can get deeper than that. Okay, but that's got a pH of 3.8. Okay, so the definition of fulvic acid is the humic acid, humic substance fraction that it's soluble in acid and alkali. Okay, so if you put the black stuff, humic acid, black, with a high pH into a hydroponic media, what happens? The black stuff separates, it fractionates, because it's not soluble in acid. So it falls to the bottom, and you have this black scum, black layer on the bottom, or it plugs up your tubes, or it plugs up the plant roots themselves. Because part of that black, the black's not humic. The black is wax, human, it's not bioactive. And it can actually literally plug the roots up. So that's why you get some wilting, you get some yellowing if you use too much. And then too much isn't good anyway to begin with, on top of the non-humic that's in there. So to use something called humic acid that's black in hydroponics makes no sense whatsoever, because the humic at a high pH cannot be soluble in a hydroponic media with the optimum pH. So then people complain, well, I'm getting this black like sediment. Yeah, because humic acid definition is that it's only soluble in alkaline, not acid and alkaline. Fulvic acid, soluble acid and alkaline. Okay, so it doesn't affect the pH of the solution. It tends to buffer it, keeps it kind of even. And then on top of that, it doesn't affect the conductivity because it's not a salt. So if you use a salt of the humic acid, like potassium humate, that's the black stuff, you're adding salt. So you're raising the conductivity. Okay, now it limits how much actual nutrients can be in that hydroponic. So you're actually limiting like the plant's, nutrient sources by doing it. So if you use full power, the Fulvic has no salt index. So it's not going to increase conductivity.
And Dr. Faust, that's really critical in the formulation of that, the process by which that is derived, your biodigestation process. You don't add any salts.
Right. So most of the products in the market, first of all, they use an alkaline extraction with lye, potassium hydroxide. You form a salt, black. And then you add phosphoric acid or some kind of acid, see? And so that drops out the humic. So then you have a yellow or maybe brownish liquid loaded with salt because you've added an acid like phosphoric acid to cause that separation, that fractionization of the humic substances. So instead of having like something with zero salts and conductivity, like our product, Full Power, now you got one loaded with salt, they call it fulvic acid. Okay, but it can't be considered organic because they use phosphoric acid, and also it'll test high in in phosphoric acid, so it can't pass registration criteria. Okay, so now.
And then, Bob, there's also the bioactive form of fulvic acid, which yours is bioactive. Because of your process, you maintain the bioactivity.
Yeah.
That's another real critical.
Because the whole thing, bottom line on the whole thing, is that these products, the humic substances, fulvic acid, everything like that, is produced by microorganisms from day one. It's a biological process. And, so it's fungal activity, a lot of it's conversion of like organic matter, bark, lignin, into soluble organic matter. But it's really the remains of the action of microorganisms. And it's like the excretion, you might say, or the products produced by decomposition, which is really microorganisms.
Yeah.
So our extraction process using microorganisms to complete that process and make a stable product. It can just sit here forever and not get moldy, not get weird. It's going to be effective. People ask me, Well, what's the shelf life on this? How long can it last? Well, I tell them the raw material we used to make it's already 18,000 years old. So it'll probably last another 18.
Okay, Dr. Faust, concerning the hydroponic growers, what do you have for us there?
Okay, well, like I was saying, the reasons why you'd use a stabilized fulvic in hydroponics. Okay, I just covered that. Okay, so how do we know? I mean, a lot of people say, I want to try the product for a year or two on a small area and see if it works. Okay. Now, we've already done that for the last 30 or 40 years. Okay, so I get it. You know, we need third-party verification, or you got to see it with your own eyes. Okay. Now, we've had research done at the Agricultural Indoor Gardening College of the Humboldt University of Berlin. It's one of the leading colleges in one of the leading universities in Europe. They specialize in indoor gardening, hydroponics, aeroponics, everything to do with that specific function. So a 3-year study was done, and it resulted in a researcher, Dr. Hong Tai Lua, getting essentially a PhD degree. You know, in German it was a Doctor of Rerum Horticulturum, which is Latin, you know, like a Doctor of Horticulture degree. So using our products in greenhouse at the Indoor Gardening College of Humboldt University Berlin. Okay. So what that showed, just to sum up 3 years of research done, and this is, I had nothing to do with it. This is completely third party. And what it basically showed, you know, somebody's already spent a lot of money and spent 3 years figuring this out. See, so that's the thing. So that's why we guarantee the analysis. We use the HPTA method. We know it's fulvic acid. Okay, we know what concentration. So the research in Germany showed these are the features of like the benefits that were shown. Okay, increased seed germination time and seedling vigor. Now that's something that's universal across the research spectrum in humic substances, that increases seed germination time. That's decreases. No, it actually decreases seed germination time. In other words, the seed germinates faster, noticeably faster than untreated, and increases the seedling vigor. It increases the root mass and nutrient uptake. So you get more roots, you get more fibrous roots. So you have more roots, then you get more nutrient uptake. So that supports the growth of the plant better because it's got a better base, it's got a better root system. And it protects by mediating the effects of abiotic stress like higher low temperatures or suboptimum nutrients and light. So like if you don't get your nutrient concentration exactly right, you know, if you have our product full humic fulvic acid in there, it kind of moderates some of those inconsistencies in your nutrient formulation. Let's say it gets really cold like it does in Germany, Berlin in winter, you know, so you got cold stress. Okay, it helps mediate that stress. And light's a little bit low in the winter, you know, and so what happens, it moderates the effect of that. Why? Because the plant produces more chlorophyll. It's greener. It's more chloroplast. Can produce more energy. And so the plant will actually adapt, let's say, to lower light by producing more green, which is the chlorophyll, chloroplast. And we've seen cases where we had growers, hydroponic growers, say they could reduce the intensity of their UV, of their grow lights, and actually save money. Okay, and then the other, protecting from drought. And that's because, and cold, like freeze and drought, frost and drought, that's a big issue of the Chinese researchers that work on fulvic acid. It's because it increases the sugars in the plant, so it helps protect against freeze or drought, desiccation. Okay, then the big one is increased biomass and total dry matter yield. Okay, so the research in Germany on specific hydroponic crops, in this case it was water spinach and tomatoes, increased the dry matter yield by over 50%. Now, I've talked to people, we've talked to different growers, dealers, distributors, and they say, 50%, that's like almost doubling the yield. Yeah, it is. You know, it's not my number. That's actual research done in a major university. You know, they say, oh, that's not possible. Yeah, I'm just telling you. I'm just telling you like it is. And there's many, many examples across the spectrum in humic research that we get 50% or higher yield increase. I mean, my product was tested in China on millet, a whole range of crops, okay? Dryland crops in China. Yeah, we showed a 68% increase in millet, you know. So you just can't discount well done research and say that doesn't make sense. But you don't know the facts. Okay, so the research showed a dry matter yield by over 50%. And it improved the quality by increasing the mineral content and other quality factors. Does not alter the pH or the TDS of the nutrient media. These results are consistent with results in vegetables and herbal crops observed by growers using bioag fulvic acid over the past 12 years. So this was, the research paper was called Investigations on the Effect of Humic Acids on Growth and Nutrient Uptake of Tomatoes and Water Spinach, Berlin, August 2003. And so that's why you can have confidence that our product is going to have a benefit, specifically in the crops I mentioned that are known to be highly responsive: potato, sugar beets, carrots, and tomatoes, and in hydroponics. You know, and there's no need to have to do your own research. Somebody has done a very good job of the research, and our product is registered and guaranteed based on the newest testing methods, you know, that are accepted by the regulatory officials, AFCO, and where I'm sitting right now, the state of Oregon. So if it's guaranteed, it says fulvic acid, hydrophobic fulvic acid, that's the test method that verifies that it is what it's supposed to be, and then the rest follows, which is the increase in seed germination time, yield, etc., etc. So, you know, because I have a lot of people that say, well, we'll try your product for a couple of years or something, you know, in a small area and see if it works. Well, if it really is fulvic acid, it's guaranteed and registered as that, you know, and it's based on research and over 40 years of experience, it's gonna work. And that's why we're the leading producer of these humic substances, specifically full power fulvic acid, is used in hydroponics. And it's available from just about every grow shop and the major distributors in North America.